a bit about CMDB implementation. And I thought the title would get into all of our documents, but apparently, one, the schedule at a glance had it wrong, and two, my title is TBA in the big schedule. So here we are. Well, CMDB implementation. It was a dark and stormy night. Nightmare. Rolling thunder, doom and gloom. So, now why would we have Mona Lisa in the presentation on CMDB? Well, there's been a lot of thought over centuries since this painting was painted as to what is she thinking about. Well, thanks to the modern technology of looking through the past, well, actually by making things up, I can tell you exactly what she was thinking. Did I really just hear you say you're going to implement a CMDB? Ha! Bit of a joke. Configuration management database, configuration management system, whatever you want to call it. It's one of the most difficult things to do when you talk about IT service management. Yet, it's one of the most important things that you can attempt to do when you're doing a service management strategy. We're going to hear, primarily this is an open discussion. I've got some slides to help give us some structure, but if you have any questions along the way, I highly encourage them. So, who am I? Well, I started to do that. Now I'll do it for real. My name is Mark Trubl. I'm a senior manager of service management with U.S. Foods. I'm ITIL certified V3 expert, V2 service manager, also ISO 20K certified at the consultant manager level. Got over 25 years of experience in the Valley, service desk, desktop support, system administration, application administration, IT operations management, IT service management, which I've been doing for the past 10 or 15 years. So, in any case, I guess I hope I know what I'm talking about when we talk about this subject. In any case, so let's ask the real question. Why do a CMDB at all? Really? Well, as IT service management professionals, we can espouse, expand, expound, talk all day about how CMDB supports all of our different processes. Incident management, problem management, change, capacity, so on, so on, so on. Little areas inside of that, all supported by the CMDB. From an incident management perspective, we know what's impacted and what's impacted by what's impacted. Problem management helps us identify what we need to fix. Change management tells us what we're changing. CMDB supports capacity management by telling us what we have in terms of capacity, what's available, what's used, what state things are in. Service level management is supported by the CMDB because CMDB, the CIs that are in a CMDB, make up the services that are covered under service levels. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into this. This is kind of service management 101 stuff, so we'll kind of skip over this. Again, why do a CMDB at all? Well, one thing, CMDB helps you with accurate inventory. Hardware, software, many different kinds of things. Hardware we call assets, software can be assets as well. So, accurate inventory. Helps us with impact analysis, and this primarily supports our incident management process, problem management process, change management process, whatever. It's all about those relationships that we define in our CMDB that makes it valuable and why we want to do one. Cost transparency, another great part of the CMDB. We get asked all the time, hey IT, where did all that money we gave you go to? Well, let me just show you. Here we have a nice database, shows you everything that we have, how it's all related together, so on and so forth. Now, when I put this together, unfortunately none of this made it into the the printed material, so kind of flying blind here, but I was hoping some people could tell us what are your drivers for implementing CMDB today. Do we have anybody even here for CMDB that would like to talk about that at all? Otherwise, we'll carry on. Okay. Well, there's a lot of drivers. You know, some of these are why we want to do it. There are a lot of drivers. These are some of them. Primarily, the biggest driver that I can think of when it comes to implementing a CMDB is to help the business be successful. Now, you can say, hey Mark, how can a database that has assets and relationships in it really help support our business? Well, that's where one of the things that I talked about earlier was capacity management. Using our CMDB, we know what our capacity is, we know what we're capable of. And therefore, we support our business objectives by ensuring that we have the capacity to support their business requirements. At US Foods, we just recently released our third version of our e-commerce platform, completely built from the ground up, and we're really concerned about capacity. So, yes?
So Mark, how are you defining capacity when you say, because that's a very large and nebulous word.
Well, you're right about that. So we want to know what servers we have. We want to know what network devices we have. We want to know what versions of our software that we're running on. We want to know how much storage we have in our storage array, so on and so forth. So that's what I mean when we talk about capacity. That's kind of a oblique way of looking at it, but in any case. Oh, we have a blank screen here. I wasn't expecting that. Ah, there we go. So where do I start? When we talk about doing a CMDB, it is really difficult to determine where we want to start. So let's take a look at some things that we can take a look at. Now, one of my favorite things to talk about is the Deming cycle. Many of you may know it as PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. So here at US Foods, we live by the PDCA methodology, Deming cycle. Unfortunately for us, when it came to CMDB, we did a lot of planning, a lot of doing, a lot of checking, a lot of planning, a lot of doing, a lot of checking. A lot of planning, a lot of doing, a lot of checking. We first attempted to implement our CMDB in 2012. We use HP Service Manager as our service management tool. This is not about that, just to let you know what we're using. It has a CMDB-like function inside of the tool. And that's what we were using prior to 2012. Well, in all actuality, by doing our shortcutted PDCA, we're still using it. We haven't quite gotten to the CMDB piece yet. What we attempted to do in 2012 was take what we had in Service Manager and throw it into a CMDB. Well, that didn't work, so we erased it all and we tried again. So,
why? You want me to ask you?
Good question. So in 2011, we implemented HP Service Manager. Now, I have the way back machine a little bit. So in 2011, I joined US Foods. It's a company of 10,000 folks. I am the single IT service management professional at US Foods. So, those of you smiling and going, oh my gosh, what the heck? This can give you the reason why it didn't work for us. So, I came in just as we were implementing a new service management tool. We were using a very extremely old version of Remedy. No longer had an upgrade cycle to the latest version. Highly customized. And at that point in time also, US Foods had been sold to a new company. The Remedy implementation we were using was owned by the previous owners, and they had given us until June 26, 2011 to get off of their version or start charging us $10,000 a day. Rather expensive. So we had to choose a new tool, we had to implement it, and it was basically 6 months we had to get it done. We started in January. I didn't join until March, so it was already 3 months into it. And oh my gosh, was it a mess. So I had to try to figure out how to make this work from a configuration management database perspective. The old Remedy tool had been customized so that it had, and of course, again, 15 years old, so you can imagine, what, ITIL? What does that mean? So there was no compliance to service management principles that you see across every tool set today. Remedy was being used, so it had a little bit of CI stuff, a little bit of symptom stuff, a little bit of free text stuff for people to define how to assign tickets. So here I come in, hi, I'm ITIL, and well, nobody knew what the heck I was talking about when it came to configuration management database, let alone a service catalog, or the difference between a business service catalog and an IT service catalog. So I did a little training session for several weeks trying to give this information out to people. And I said, okay, I need the different areas, network, server, application support, development, telecoms, all the different IT organizations. Give me your CIs. I've shown you what a CI is, give them to me. So I get back all these spreadsheets, and we have CIs like login failure, That's a good one. You know, printer problems, that was a CI, so on and so forth. So obviously,
not the printer data, not the printer. Not
yeah,
the print,
exactly, exactly.
Training was not effective.
Yeah, so obviously, I should have maybe started a little more basic than I did. In the end, I had to go through all of that and try to come up with a configuration management database of some kind for us to use. Again, June 26th deadline. So we implemented what we had, and it was very generic. So for example, we didn't have, you know, server 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had HP server. We had Windows server. So on and so very generic names, just so that we could identify some things. And the organization didn't care because they never cared about that stuff anyway. They used spreadsheets. That's where they cared about what assets they had, let alone relationships. What do we need to know that about? Most of our people have been working at US Foods for 10 or more years. They all know what's going on. Let them take care of all that. So there you go. So 2012, we attempted to import. We had an HP Service Manager into our CMDB product. Failed. We got erased it all. So then we took another step in 2013 and said, okay, let's try to do this a little better. Let's plan a little better. So what's our scope? Okay, let's actually use a discovery tool. That'll at least get us our hardware. Okay, so we did that. The problem is US Foods has been around in one form or another since the 1800s. Through acquisition, it's become what it is today. So through acquisition, we acquired new networks, new subnets. Our network is such a spaghetti factory. You've got desktops on the same network as enterprise assets and so on and so forth. Mixtures between development and non-production and production. So it was very difficult from a discovery perspective for us to determine what was a real CI that we wanted to track in our configuration management database. We were using Altiris and some other desktop or client service type tools to keep track of our PCs, workstations, and whatnot. So we wanted to exclude all that. Plus, we only had a license for 1,300 CI, so we couldn't include all those to do that. We got through that and imported everything into ours. So we put it into CMDB. Then we went through an exercise to import it into HP Service Manager, set up a nice little daily feed to each. And well, as I said, US Foods implemented Service Manager in 2011 based on an old, very customized, highly customized version of Remedy. I, the lone IT service management professional in the organization, trying to stand on the bastion of best practice, going, stop, wait, let's not customize so much. Well, we did it anyway, and because of that customization, when we imported all of the 48,000 CIs that we actually discovered, a tiny bit more than we were licensed to discover, it slowed down Service Manager so much that it became unusable. So we had to delete all of that out of Service Manager and go back to the drawing board again, let alone going, okay, we have 48,000 CIs, we're licensed for 1,300, how are we going to get rid of these? So we went back to square one again. So we went ahead and did discovery again, and we did a better job of defining subnets and networks to do discovery for. We're actually kind of getting far ahead, so let me move on to another slide here, but hold on to that thought. Little box ahead, watch out. So, you've probably heard this all day today in many of the breakout sessions that no service management initiative will be successful without executive support. And that, of course, means 800-pound gorilla in the room. Start to the top. CIO has to support what you're doing. His VPs have to support what you're doing, and so on and so forth. And the attitude that your 800-pound gorilla takes ends up into your organization as well. So your CIO talks to his VPs, their VPs talk to their direct reports. And the attitudes that we have from here get filtered to this level, their attitudes get filtered to this level, and of course it gets filtered down and down and down and down and down. So here you are, service management, trying to get something accomplished that you know is going to help the organization. We're going to have one place to keep track of all of our CIs, all of our assets. On top of our assets, we're going to have applications in there, and we're going to have them all related together into services. We're going to be able to do impact analysis, so on and so on and so on. Yeah, whatever. We're happy with our spreadsheets. No one's pressing me to work with you, Mark, so I'll use a little South Parkism. Screw you guys, I'm going home. So that was the attitude that we had at US Foods as well. You know, to be fair, everybody's busy. Everybody's busy. We all, do more with less, mantra of the past 20 years or more. Because there wasn't this support, really support, as expressed explicitly at the top, nobody was able to find time in their busy schedules to help me move forward with discovery, let alone application entry, let alone service mapping, so on and so forth. So, 800-pound, 8,000-pound, 8 million-pound gorilla in the room is always, 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 always executive support. So, right along lines with the same line of executive support, I think we have financial support. Oh, there it is, financial support. So I have a little graphic here. We all know this guy. What's one of his favorite lines? $1 million. So I'm being a bit facetious, but you got to ask for some money. And it's not cheap to implement a CMDB. Unless you're going to try to maybe use SharePoint or some other repository, a spreadsheet fed by a database you created on your own, you're going to choose an enterprise product, which means enterprise class pricing. So, our particular tool set cost us about $250,000 to purchase, and about, all of our, so we're an HP shop, so we have a bunch of HP tools. We pay almost $500,000 a year total in maintenance, licensing, so on and so forth. So, financial support is a huge, huge deal and can be a huge roadblock because you say, I want $1 million. But what you actually mean is, I want $1 billion. And of course, we don't want that to happen. And that actually is another thing that happened to me and to US Foods. So we did 2 projects, one in 2012, cost us tens of thousands of dollars, which failed. 2013, we tried it again. We had some success. We were able to implement some of our tools, but in the end, we had to break that replication between Service Manager and CMDB, get rid of all those CIs on CM that we had gotten into the Service Manager, and start again from scratch.
Well, so the thing is that one project really spawns off several other projects, right?
Yes.
And the problem is that the CMDB really ends up relying upon the data that's being fed into it from those subsystems, right? And if
Absolutely.
the data is not clean coming in,
Right.
junk in, junk out, right? So you can spend all this fancy money, right?
Right.
But
Hire an implementation partner, put together a project team, pay $200 an hour to a few contractors, and still, unless the organization is supporting you in that,
Exactly.
you're turning your wheels.
Right.
And I think you're doing a good segue to my next slide
Do
here.
you have a different CMDB product than you did for your service product?
I'm sorry, yes. So let me explain. So Service Manager is a full suite of tools. So you've got incident management, service level management, problem management, change management. There's even a release management component. There's a knowledge management component. And there is a configuration management component. So there's an internal database inside of Service Manager, which we're using as a CMDB-like resource for doing our incident, change, and problem. And of course, we wanted that to be fed by our centralized configuration management system, which was the original reason why we took everything out of Service Manager, imported it into CMDB, and then fed it back to Service Manager. But again, because we really struggled in that initial implementation of configuration management and a CMDB, what we put into the CMDB was basically garbage. So you take garbage out of Service Manager, you put the garbage into CMDB, then you re-export it back to Service Manager, and then you've got garbage everywhere. So that's how we ended up. So
Can I add
Yes.
question? So Was that the HP CMDB product, part of HP Service Manager you were dealing with, or did you have a separate product that you were using to pull all the data into and then go ahead and export over to HP?
We are an HP shop as far as our service management tools are. So without having to explicitly say it, I'll say yes. Yes, we use HP's UCMDB, we use their DDMA discovery tool, and we use a whole slew of their monitoring tools and so on and so forth.
Okay.
The idea that we chose a single vendor was that the integration was much easier between the tool sets. And to be honest, integrating HP Service Manager and UCMDB was very easy to do. It's just the outcome based on the data that we had was just a horrible, horrible mess.
Yeah.
Was the data that you had data that you've always had, or data that you got from your collection tool? I'm trying to kind of understand where it went to heck.
Yeah. So I think I might be able to help you here, but to precede my slide a bit, we manually entered about 4,500 CIs into HP Service Manager of various kinds. Whittled down from a list of about 10,000, I had to throw most of that, over half of them away because they weren't CIs. So we had those 4,500, which we took when we implemented, so we implemented Service Manager in 2011. We implemented UCMDB in 2012. We attempted to export data into UCMDB from Service Manager and then reconnected back to Service Manager through the connecting tool. So then we started to do discovery. But let's talk about that a little bit. Oops. Whiz-bang tools, i.e. discovery. Discovery tools make data collection really, really, really easy in some ways, and other ways really, really, really hard. For example, 1,300 licenses, 48,000 CIs discovered. So that was a little hard to try to whittle down to a more manageable level. We ended up, of course, having to purchase additional licenses, which HP was happy to supply for us for a price. $1 billion. We use DDMA. Every service management tool set out there has a discovery tool. They all do basically the same thing. Some do one thing better than others. UCMDB, what we primarily used it for was just inventory discovery. Let's discover our Unix boxes, our Windows boxes, let's discover what's running on our IBM mainframe. Haney, yes?
So Mark, when you do discovery, do you discover by IP address or do you discover by name?
We discovered by IP address.
By IP address.
Yeah.
Right.
So we attempted to do a more intelligent by discovering by host name and whatnot.
Yeah.
In fact, we had developed a really cool little discovery pattern to help us determine not only what was a host, but by the host name, what service it was associated to. The problem is that, as I said, US Foods has been around since the 1800s in one form or another. So, we like standards, we have a million of them. So
Yeah, I kind of understood from when you had an earlier slide. I was waiting for you to actually say it, right? So, my name is Handy Bandy. Am I discovering Handy.Bandy, Handy_Bandy,
right.
Handy-Bandy, right? And if I now want to correlate in my service tool, which one is it am I correlating against? Is it Handy.Bandy or Handy_Bandy? Right?
Exactly.
The naming convention is huge.
Exactly, which is the reason why we went to IP discovery, because we could not rely on our naming conventions. We have servers that are 15, 20 years old, and with a naming convention that you can't change, and so on and so forth. So all the discovery tools today are pretty easy to use from infrastructure, hardware point of view. It can also do a good job of discovering standardized software packages, Oracle processes, PeopleSoft processes, and out-of-the-box stuff is a no-brainer. We know you can define those very easy to discover. Again, US Foods, 1800s, we have most of our tool sets are homegrown, developed in-house. No way in heck can you discover those unless you tell it how to. So let me kind of go back here again. Yeah, here we go. So back to our busy organization who can't give me the time of day to help me figure out what Prism is and how I can discover through our discovery tool. Okay, so we said, all right, we aren't going to do discovery patterns and discover our software. Let's just put our services in there, and then we'll try to hook up things together from there. Let me get back to where we were. So we're using Discovery only for hardware, and that's challenging because, again, even our own network support people can't tell us what subnets actually define our production environment completely. Scary thought, scary thought. I've been there for 4 years now. I actually just passed my 4-year anniversary at the end of March, so I can't believe we've been there that long. Lone standing ITSM guy in a sea of 10,000. But we've been talking, at least as long as I've been there, about completely redoing our network. But people's eyes just almost pop out of their head when we talk about that, because that would be so impactful, so extremely impactful that really there's no way. You know, when I talk about $1 billion, that would probably be $1 billion investment to try to get this huge spaghetti wire of crap, pardon my French, in some kind of decent order. So whiz-bang tools are awesome, but they can also cause problems if you rely on them too much or too little. Spreadsheets. Let's talk about spreadsheets. Everybody loves spreadsheets. Everybody's got one for the things that they care about. Our Unix team had one. They had all of their Unix hosts in there, and they had, of course, their own customized attributes, which we would have to set up inside of the CMDB to be able to import those. Windows guys, the same thing. We had VMware. We had, you know, our Oracle and our SQL database people putting information in their own spreadsheets. And of course, sometimes, since we're human beings, we get things wrong. So they get host names wrong, they get IP addresses wrong, they do some copy and paste errors, further adding to the errors in what we're importing into the CMDB. So if we have to compare these two ways of populating your CMDB, I would always go with the whiz-bang tool. Even though that has its own challenges, I would trust the whiz-bang tool because it's going to report you what it found. You're going to know that it's there. With the spreadsheet, it's only as good as last time somebody checked it out of SharePoint, and that they checked it out of SharePoint instead of just taking a local copy that they keep on their desk, and that's where they maintain their stuff. So there's yet another challenge where spreadsheets are concerned. You know, our Unix team has 20 people in it. Each one of them had their own version of the spreadsheet on their desktop. So there you go. That's real easy to keep in sync. You know, it's an old IT shop. You know, they believe in, you know, when we talk about ITIL, we talk about people, process, and technology, and also partners. Sometimes is included in there. Our organization really, before I joined, believed in people and technology. Forget process in any way, shape, or form. And so that's been the challenge that I've had for the past few years, and it comes out in our CMDB initiatives. Manual input. So we've done quite a bit of that in attempting to move things along. Manual input is pretty good, as long as you have somebody who is pretty articulate, and in the case of UCMDB, has a degree in rocket science. So it's not the easiest tool to use. So when, again, you're talking about whiz-bang tools, your whiz-bang tool is only whiz-bang if your people can use it. So that's yet another issue that we had. Cost, you know, $2,500, $3,000 to send somebody to HP training class. We sent 3 people there. One of them kind of got it. so we made him the configuration manager. Oh, by the way, he's also the problem manager and special projects guy. So configuration management and CMDB is a full-time job. It is not something that can be done as a part-time piece or another hat someone wears. The skill set required to be a good configuration manager and to maintain a good CMDB is a full-time job. And so thus yet, because we only had a half-time job, part-time job, more challenges, more issues, more add and delete, so on and so forth. I think somebody already mentioned this. There's no such thing as set it and forget it. No such thing. I think it was Diskkeeper that kind of coined that phrase. I don't know if they actually patented it or not, but when it comes to CMDB and configuration management, there is no such thing as set it and forget it. And that was yet another issue that we faced at US Foods. Our approach to most things is just get it implemented. Okay, so what do you mean by implemented? Well, let's get it installed, let's get it populated with data, let's implement it. Okay, so day 1 we're current, day 2 we're no longer current. Day 3 we're worse, week 4 it's completely no good. We have to start over again by month 5, and we did that a few times. So once again, going back to organizational support, executive support, you've got to have an appropriate amount of resources to do configuration management well. And this is yet another reason why many people just give up after a while. Now, you know, we are on our 4th attempt this year, and well, the one guy I had, let me digress just a second. When I talk about organizational support, at US Foods, we have, and again, I'm not here to sales pitch HP products or anything. It's just what we use. We have HP Service Manager, HP CMDB, DDMA Discovery. We have NNMI. We have OpenView Operations Manager. We have Performance Manager. We have Service Health Reporter. We have Business Process Monitor. We have Business Service Manager. We are washed blue through and through. So you talk to any implementation partner who implements HP products and ask them, so what should our team look like to support this suite of 8 or 10 tools? Well, you're probably going to need at least half a dozen, maybe 8 or 10, one for each product. I got one guy to support the entire suite. So yet again, organizational support, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Well, my guy left in January. And I have not been able to replace him since, because there's not a single person out there that can replace all 8 or 10 of those tool sets and those skill sets. And I have no authorization to hire more. So again, organizational support, 800-pound gorilla. Don't set it and forget it. So we're still just talking about data population here. So let's talk about relationship mapping. Now that's where we get power from our CMDB. Except we have the same issues as data population. Only 10 times worse. Relationship mapping is the hardest thing to do when it comes to CMDB implementation. You need your best and brightest folks to do this if you're using homegrown in-house developed programs, because they're the only people that know. Haney, yes?
So how did you develop the schema, right? I mean, you know, is the schema already existing in the HP tooling? Because relationship mapping, you know, to me is, as you said, fairly complex, especially if you're going to apply that to correlation of events or service level agreements and or service level management, right?
Sure.
So, you know, how did you go about building the relationship mapping, right?
Well, we used OOB out of UCMDB, out of the box configuration for UCMDB. To give you an idea, thank you. Wow, I actually filled the whole time. I don't believe it. I have a PDF, 248 pages of all the relationship types that UCMDB supports. Oh my God. So, to your point about schema, that goes back to the planning phase. You really, really need to understand what your scope you're trying to accomplish. And it looks like I'm going to run out of time, so I'm just going to get moving along. Relationship mapping, for the most part, is the make it or break it step. If you are not successful at relationship mapping, you might as well just kick your UCMDB or your configuration management system out the door, because it's not going to provide the value that you were looking for. It doesn't matter how many billions of dollars we put into that thing. Without the relationship mapping, it's not going to work. And we at US Foods have not yet been able to get to that step after 3 years. Very frustrating. All right, well, in the few minutes that I've got left, waking from the bad dream. So I'm going to go back to the Deming cycle. Rely on this, especially the planning phase. Do it in phases. Collect your assets. Define your relationships, your schema that you're going to try to do. Make it as simple as possible. Do what you have to do. Don't worry about the 240-page document that says all the things you can do. I mean, I think for for SQL database, there were like 60 defined CI relationship types just for SQL database. Oh my God, what? Don't get me started about Active Directory. Holy crap, there was like, 100 pages on Active Directory alone. So, planning. Get yourself an implementation partner. It really, really does help. And listen to them. Listen to your implementation partner. You hired them for their expertise. Listen to them. Something else we did at US Foods was, oh, thanks for coming in and doing this stuff, but we're not going to listen to you. We want you to do it the way we did it in Remedy. So recreate Remedy for us in HP Service Manager. And that's what we did. This is actually the last slide of my presentation, so I guess I did pretty good. The ideas here now. Questions, comments, donations.
But no, actually what you should say is accepting applications.
Yeah, there we go. I do want to remind everybody, I think I might have said it, I've been saying it all day because I've been in this room all day. We love your feedback. We have stepped into the 21st century this year. We have a QR code here on the screen. If you have a smartphone that can read a QR code, it'll take you right to our feedback website. And more than likely my presentation isn't in there because of all the other issues we've had today. But for anything, I'm getting the thumbs up from Stephanie.
As the person
my
that did the
presentation
survey,
is in there.
you're in there.
So if you liked what you saw today, please say so. If you didn't like what you saw today, tell me that as well.
If you want feedback on any of the other sessions
Exactly.
during the day,
Yeah. Any session you attended today can be accessed through this QR code. As well, I meant to put that slide in my presentation. The actual URL is here too, so if you can't read a QR code, it's a very easy URL to just write down and go to later. We have like 5 minutes for questions or additional comments or anything. Is there anything that I can answer for anyone? I'm here, as my unprinted abstract said, this is a frank and pragmatic discussion. I'll let you have it straight. You can ask me anything you want to straight regarding CMDB anyway. Yes?
Sorry, it sounds like you more or less got nowhere. Is that too frank? I mean, it's
No. We have made some strides. We probably have achieved 99% asset discovery. So that's pretty good. That actually isn't bad. Problem is I have no one to maintain my CMDB today. So I'm not sure how accurate that is anymore because he left January 15th.
Yeah.
Here we are, beginning of March. I doubt it's all that great anymore.
I mean, it's a real testament for organizational support. You can't expect one guy who is running vacations to do everything.
Exactly.
And what if you leave?
Right. And thus that's what we are.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's a challenge, it is. But again, we have achieved 99% asset. We also, I don't know how people might be familiar with application portfolio management. So we had our business define their business services for us and the applications that are in there. We've also got that in there. There is no relationship between those right now. So we have an asset database and we have an application portfolio in our CMDB as well. The challenge, as I said earlier, make it or break it step, is figuring out how to relate those two together. Yes.
So if you're starting at the beginning, which we kind of are, when you start relating that to change management, I hear some people say you need a CMDB to do it correctly. All the other stuff, other people say go ahead and get incident, problem, change going, and then when you can, because it's such a big ordeal, bring the CMDB.
That is a great question because that is the exact question I asked when I first joined US Foods in March of 2011. The answer was, we're going to implement incident problem change and whatever we can put into a CMDB. And here we are 3 years later, still suffering from that decision. So, if your organization has the wherewithal and the chutzpah to do it, quote unquote, correctly, plan out your CMDB at least. Maybe you're not going to implement it right away, but make that plan, scope it out, decide what you're going to put in there, define your relationship so that when you can get to that point, if you don't have to redo everything from scratch like we've had to do now 3 times. Implementing incident problem change will get you a great big bang for your buck, but you still have to have some kind of configuration to go against because one of my favorite terms when I talk about incident problem change is the iron triangle of service management. Incidents at the top create problems at the left, create changes at the right, create incidents at the top. And unless you know what's impacted, you're never going to be able to reduce that cycle. It's going to be a constant thing because you don't know what you're impacting. All right, any others? Great question. Yes, ma'am.
So do you have to have a second product, or can you, and this is specific to HP, we happen to own HP Service Manager, and we own some bits of CMDB.
Yeah.
Do we have to use UCM?
Absolutely not.
Whatever the other fellow is?
Absolutely
Okay.
not at all. If you have a high confidence in your spreadsheets or whatever you're using today to manage assets, import them into your service management tool.
Okay.
And use that as a basis. Going back to your point, you've probably got at least a database of assets. And this is probably the best way I can say to start CMDB. Get your assets in there so that you know from an infrastructure perspective what you have. Next step upon that is to get your application inventory in there. Again, let's not worry about relationships yet. Let's worry about our assets. Let's worry about our applications. If you have someone on the business side who's defined business services, let's get those in there as well. The last step is the relationship mapping, because that is the most difficult to do. And that's all I can say. Any other questions or comments?
So to me, I think one of the things you have to think about is how active is your environment. How often are you changing?
That's a great
that move out change process really is going to drive your CMDB and how often the data is updated in there. And so if you have a fairly static environment, right, then you can assume that the data is going to be okay, right?
Yes.
But if you have a fairly dynamic environment where things are being provisioned, deprovisioned, several times a day, for example, right, then that data is going to move quite a bit.
Right.
And so
That's
in
where
that
discovery
environment,
tools.
you probably want to be a little more hands-on to make sure that data is clean, right? Because especially if you're driving, trouble tickets and other processes off of it, then you want to be fairly neurotic about making sure that data is sane, right? Especially if you're a large organization and you're dispatching people to a site and they have to carry parts and right to replace a router or to replace something.
Very good
right,
point.
Then it makes a huge difference that data is good.
And I think 99% is amazing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sitting here, that's not successful, that's amazing to have 99% of it.
I have to say I'm pretty happy about that as well. I mean, at least in 3 years,
I'd be happy with 85.
at least in 3 years, we believe we have 99%, based on the subnets that we know about. So I really, to be honest, I'm only as positive as I can be in the subnets that we've discovered. And I have a feeling that we're okay, but in the end,
Wait till you move to software-defined networking, and then you're going to have the real deal, okay?
exactly.
It's probably a good first step considering the hardware.
Yes, exactly. Well, that was the main reason why. So Cisco, with an S, not with a C, has made a bid to merge with US Foods, or to acquire US Foods. They did that. They announced that at the end of 2013. So when I talk about spinning our wheels for 3 years, I do have to give 2014 a caveat, because 2014 was the year of the merger preparation for us. So that's where we got our 99% inventory from. Is that was one of the biggest things that we had to accomplish in 2014 to prepare for a merger with US Foods. Cisco. Cisco says, US Foods, what hardware you got? What do we have? What assets are we going to have when we acquire you? So that was the
So
main.
you got your executive sponsorship then, you got your.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That was when we got our executive. Yeah. Because John Lederer, our CEO, was going to make somewhere between $3 and $9 million for for making this successful. So yes, that is where the executive support came from. We are actually a couple minutes past. Thank you all. I'm surprised. Thanks again for coming today.